that it's a pretty heavy load to come into this committee under oath and accuse a senator of absolutely false claims and lying, because I'm protected by the committee. So I wanted to make a record of the fact that when we went through the statement that he said was a lie and all falsehoods, he agreed to every single element of that statement, one by one, in his QFRs, except minor details like filling in an ellipsis or saying that he bragged. None of that amounts to lying. None of that makes the statements the least bit false. I stand by what I said, and I wish this committee held our witnesses to a higher standard of conduct.
You just heard a U.S. senator say something extraordinary, that the man nominated to be Attorney General called him a liar under oath in front of Congress, and then confirmed in writing that every single thing the senator said was true. That senator is Sheldon Whitehouse. The nominee is Todd Blanche. But hold on, this is only the tip of a much bigger problem. Whitehouse listed 8 specific accusations. Things like refusing to put a slush fund's death in writing, hiring a January 6th rioter who called for police to be killed, and denying Trump encouraged any violence that day. Blanche's response live was that almost everything Whitehouse said was absolutely false. Then the written follow-up questions came back. And one by one, under oath, Blanche said, yes, yes, yes. Is this what a future Attorney General's word is actually worth? Stay tuned, because watching him confirm his own accusers' claims, one by one, will leave you speechless.
This committee under oath and accuse a senator of absolutely false claims. In my exchange with Mr. Blanche last week, let me say what I said, and let me tell the committee what his response was. Here's what I said. You have refused to exclude January 6 rioters from your anti-weaponization fund. You have refused to put in writing that the slush fund is dead. Indeed, you signaled to allies that payouts are still on track. You have vacated seditious conspiracy convictions against members of the Proud Boys and Oath Keepers. You hired January 6 rioter Jared Wise, who had urged the mob to kill police officers. You scrubbed press releases about January 6 prosecutions and called the releases partisan propaganda. You denied that Trump encouraged any violence on January 6. You've cleaned house of every attorney who worked on a case related to Trump, and you've bragged that bringing justice for violent rioters meant that every one of them was either pardoned or had their sentence commuted. So that's what I said. Here was how Blanche began his response.
Almost everything the senator just said, and he's protected, he's allowed to lie, but almost everything he just said was absolutely false.
And he ended by saying,
the narrative that the senator just suggested and put on me as something I believe is absolutely not true.
We concluded that exchange by saying, well, let's look at the QFRs when you're under oath, and we can go through them one by one. Tell me where there's a lie.
I'm happy to do that.
We'll get that to you. Well, we have the QFRs back. As to the question of whether he refused to exclude January 6 rioters from the anti-weaponization fund, here's the question. Yes or no? When you testified before the Senate Appropriations Committee on May 19, 2026, in response to the question whether individuals who assaulted Capitol Hill police officers are eligible to apply for payments under the anti-weaponization fund, did you say, and I quote, anybody in this country is eligible to apply if they believe they were a victim of weaponization? End quote. Response? Yes. So there's one.
Sheldon Whitehouse isn't a random critic. He's a senior Democrat on the Senate Judiciary Committee, and he's known for one specific tactic. Instead of just arguing in the hearing room, he goes back afterward and files written questions for the record, QFRs, that require sworn, written answers. Think about why that matters. In a live hearing, a witness can talk around a question. In a written QFR, there's a permanent, signed record. Here's what the clip doesn't spell out. Blanche's live response wasn't, "Let me clarify," or "That's an oversimplification." He said, quote, "Almost everything the senator just said was absolutely false." That's a direct, sweeping accusation of dishonesty against a sitting United States senator made under oath. To be fair, disagreement in a hearing room isn't automatically dishonesty on either side, and political framing can make the same fact sound different depending on who's saying it. But watch what happens as Whitehouse works through the list, one claim at a time, with the exact quote and the exact date attached to each one.
To the allegation that he refused to put in writing that the slush fund is dead. Question, yes or no? When you testified before the House Appropriations Committee on June 2, 2026, in response to the question whether you were going to issue a new memo in writing rescinding that May 18 memo establishing the anti-weaponization fund, did you say, I'm not committing to putting anything in writing, and okay, I'm not committing to doing anything in writing? Answer again, yes. Signal to allies that payouts are still on track. Here's the question. Yes or no, on June 2, 2026, after you said the anti-weaponization fund would not move forward, did Stanley Woodward, your subordinate, and the DOJ representative who signed the purported settlement agreement establishing the, quote, anti-weaponization fund, tweet, "We're on it," in response to a tweet suggesting that there should be a weaponization fund that will be available to the victims of the weaponized Biden Justice Department who can prove their claims against the federal government through the Federal Tort Claims Act? Again, he said, as I testified at my confirmation hearing, the fund can only operate through action by the department, namely the appointment of commissioners, the creation of a claims process, the transfer of funds and payments. At my direction, the department will not take these steps. But the point was about the Federal Tort Claims Act, which he again failed to deny, failed to show any falsehood or lie on my part. He vacated seditious conspiracy convictions against members of the Proud Boys and Oath Keepers. Question. On April 14, 2026, did DOJ move to vacate the seditious conspiracy convictions of members of the Proud Boys? Response, on April 14, 2026, the U.S. Attorney's Office for the District of Columbia filed a motion to vacate the convictions of multiple individuals that I believe are the subject of this question. Same question with respect to Oath Keepers. His answer, please see my response to the previous question. Hired January 6 rioter Jared Wise, who'd urged the mob to kill police officers. Question. Did Mr. Wise work for DOJ during your tenure as Deputy Attorney General? Mr. Wise worked at DOJ during my tenure, although I did not hire him. It would otherwise be inappropriate for me to comment on personnel matters within the Department of Justice. The facts, including emails that we have, show that Wise worked at DOJ from at least May 2025 through April 2026. Mr. Blanche was confirmed as the Deputy Attorney General in March 2025. The hiring of Mr. Wise happened under the tenure of Todd Blanche. It's hard to imagine that you can say, I did not hire him. Of course, the Deputy Attorney General doesn't hire people personally, but that evidently was the point he was trying to make. Moreover, during that time, did Mr. Wise at any point have the title of Senior Advisor in the Office of the Deputy Attorney General?
Notice the pattern building here. Every time Whitehouse asks, did you say this? Yes or no, the written answer comes back yes. On Jared Wise specifically, Blanche's defense was that he personally didn't sign the hiring paperwork, but he then confirmed in writing that Wise held the title of senior advisor in his own office and had an email address tied to that office during his tenure. Here's why this connects to something bigger happening right now. 2 days before Blanche's confirmation hearing even started, Federal Judge Kathleen Williams released a 56-page ruling on the related IRS settlement, writing that the case had been, quote, brought for an improper purpose to gain the imprimatur of judicial legitimacy for a settlement that had no viable basis in law or fact. She referred the matter for professional discipline. To be fair, a disciplinary referral is not the same as an actual disbarment, and that process can take months or longer to resolve. But here's the pattern audiences keep flagging in this story. It isn't just one senator's opinion anymore. It's a federal judge's written ruling and a senator's written QFR record, both pointing at the same credibility problem from two completely separate directions.
Personally, but that evidently was the point he was trying to make. Moreover, during that time, did Mr. Wise at any point have the title of Senior Advisor in the Office of the Deputy Attorney General? Response, yes. During that time, did Mr. Wise at any point have an email address associated with the Office of the Deputy Attorney General? Response, yes. To the scrubbing of press releases and calling them partisan propaganda. Question, did DOJ during your tenure as Deputy Attorney General or Acting Attorney General remove from its website press releases on prosecutions related to the January 6, 2021 attack on the U.S. Capitol? Response, during my tenure, the Department of Justice has worked to reverse the Biden administration's weaponization of the department. This includes stripping the department's website of partisan propaganda like the press releases mentioned, confirming the truth of my statement. Denied that Trump encouraged any violence on January 6. On November 15, 2023, in the case of United States versus Trump, I asked, did you and other attorneys representing President Trump submit a filing saying, quote, not a shred of evidence suggests President Trump called for any violence or asked anyone to enter the Capitol unlawfully on January 6? Response, yes. That is one quote from a substantive court filing. Question whether he cleaned house of every attorney who worked on a case related to Trump. QFR. On March 26, 26 at CPAC, with respect to the prosecutions against President Trump, did you say there is not a single man or woman at the Department of Justice who had anything to do with those prosecutions? Yes, that is an excerpt of my remarks. On the same day, in response to the question of how many of those investigators have been canned, did you say over 200? Over 200 either left before we came in because they knew it was coming, or were fired or took early retirement. They are no longer employed by this department. Response? Please see my response to the previous question, which was yes. This is an excerpt of my remarks. On the same day, did you say, and when it comes to the FBI, Director Patel has cleaned house there too? There isn't a single man or woman with a gun, federal agent still in that organization, that had anything to do with the prosecution of federal Trump. He agrees. He fills in the ellipsis in my QFR, adding, which takes a lot of criticism, especially because of what happened over the past several years, but he agrees with my accurate quotation with the ellipsis. And lastly, bragged that bringing justice to violent rioters meant that every one of them was either pardoned or had their sentence commuted. My question involved his March 26, 2026 presentation at CPAC, where he said, and I'm quoting here, if you look at what happened to the men and women convicted because of January 6th, by 5 p.m. on January 20th, every one of them was either pardoned or had their sentence commuted. Response? Please see my response to question 11A. It is inaccurate to say I bragged. Well, it seems to me that it's a pretty heavy load to come into this committee under oath and accuse a senator of absolutely false claims and lying because I'm protected by the committee. So I wanted to make a record of the fact that when we went through the statement that he said was a lie and all falsehoods, he agreed to every single element of that statement, one by one in his QFRs, except minor details like filling in an ellipsis or saying that he bragged. None of that amount.
Think about what just happened across this entire exchange. Whitehouse listed 8 specific, dated, quoted claims. Blanche's written answers confirmed the substance of every single one, disputing only word choices, whether he bragged, whether one detail was an ellipsis. Here's the hard math this connects to. The Senate Judiciary Committee's vote on Blanche's nomination has already been pushed back once, to July 30th, with Chairman Grassley openly frustrated at his own party's absences. The committee sits at a bare majority, and Republicans Tom Tillis and John Cornyn have both publicly raised doubts tied to this exact fund. Add this QFR record to that pressure. A federal judge has already referred the underlying settlement for discipline. Now, there's a written record where the nominee confirmed, under oath, nearly everything a senator said he lied about. None of that guarantees an outcome. But it's exactly the kind of paper trail that doesn't disappear when a news cycle ends. Whether or not the vote goes his way on July 30th, step back and look at the full picture. A senator listed 8 specific accusations. A nominee called them absolutely false under oath in front of the committee. Then the written record came back, and he confirmed nearly all of them himself. A federal judge separately referred the underlying settlement for professional discipline. So we'll ask you directly, if a future Attorney General's sworn denial doesn't survive his own written follow-up answers, what should that tell the Senate before its vote on July 30th? Drop your take in the comments. Hit subscribe if you want us tracking this record as this nomination heads toward a final vote. Because paper trails like this one don't disappear just because a hearing ends. Because this story is far from over.